Have you guys been able to keep up with all of this? This is how exhausting things have been just in the last 2 weeks. You got everybody busy fighting with each other over identity politics, which is being totally manipulated from the bottom up and the top down.
There was chaos and confusion at airports today as President Trump's immigration crackdown took effect.
This fire was started. In fact, this young man, you were participating in the fire.
My name's Carter, and I actually kind of started this fire.
This executive order was mean-spirited and un-American.
Donald Trump, suck a dick. Screw our president.
To keep everybody distracted while the actual agenda in the background that we've seen, at least since 9/11, continues on not just at full speed, but kicked into overdrive. We're about to go to war. At least by all accounts of everything that we're seeing right now, this is what they're gearing up towards. And so they got to keep everybody distracted and fighting amongst themselves so they don't see the machinations in the background. So this is just the stuff that's happened just in the last 2 weeks. And I want to put it all together in one place so you can get the full picture of what's actually happening here. As you guys know, Donald Trump and his chief strategist, Steve Bannon, put out a travel ban to 7 primarily Muslim countries. The media immediately went into overdrive, hyping this Muslim ban, calling it a Muslim ban. It's not a Muslim ban, because if it was a Muslim ban, Trump would have added Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates and Turkey to the list, and he did not. And the media has tried to say, well, maybe it's because Trump has business dealings with Saudi Arabia and Turkey and the United Arab Emirates. But that's not really it, I don't think. And neither is the argument that, well, those are the countries where the terrorists are coming from. Because if it was about where terrorists come from, again, Saudi Arabia would have been on the list, because if you go by the official 9/11 narrative, most of the hijackers came from there. So Saudi Arabia not on the list. But if you look at the countries that are, which is Iraq, Syria, Libya, Iran, Yemen, Sudan, and Somalia, you'll notice something should stand out to you. And it isn't just that those are all countries that Obama has spent the last 8 years invading and bombing, but that those are countries that the U.S. admittedly that the Pentagon had a plan to topple years ago that came out after 9/11. Do you guys remember this statement from General Wesley Clark?
This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
Pentagon had a plan. They were going to topple the governments of Iraq, Libya, Lebanon, Syria, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran. The only difference between this list and this map is trade out Lebanon for Yemen. That's about it. It's basically the same exact list. The agenda is continuing. So you had the travel ban, and then right afterwards, Iran announced that they've officially ditched the dollar. They're done. That happened on the 1st. The very next day, you had Donald Trump tweeting that Iran has been formally put on notice for firing a ballistic missile, and that they should have been thankful for the terrible Iran deal that the U.S. made with them. I'm going to get into this in just a second as to why that second statement is verbatim a play out of the Which Path to Persia playbook towards getting America into war with Iran. But first, I just want to point out that Iran fired a non-nuclear missile, which according to the deal, they were allowed to do, test fire those, as long as they were not nuclear. So they actually didn't break the deal. Okay, they didn't do anything that was against the deal that they made. But you had Trump saying that. You also had his national security advisor, Michael Flynn, who Brandon Turbeville of Activist Post refers to as a rabid anti-Iran warmonger, delivering a speech where he says we're putting Iran on notice.
As of today, we are officially putting Iran on notice. Thank you.
And he not only says it's because they fired a ballistic missile, which again isn't true, but also that they were responsible for the attack on ships in the region. And then the same day you have Press Secretary Sean Spicer falsely accusing Iran of attacking a U.S. Navy vessel.
That Iran has violated the joint resolution, that Iran's additional hostile actions that it took against our Navy vessel are ones that we are very clear are not going to sit by and take. John.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry. Yes. Sorry, thank you. Sorry, yes.
when in reality what actually happened was that Houthi rebels in Yemen attacked a Saudi Arabian ship. Well, now they're trying to say, but Iran is backing the Houthi rebels in Yemen, so Iran actually attacked the ship by proxy. But that's actually not what happened either, because the United Nations just got done putting out a whole report this last weekend about how there is no evidence or proof or anything that Iran is giving weapons or financial backing to these Houthi rebels, and that actually their influence in the region is marginal at best. So that's not even what's going on, but that's the kind of twisting of the narrative that they like to do in order to garner support from the American people for this war. And as Tony Cartalucci of Land Destroyer Report pointed out in this excellent article about how they're edging us closer to war, this whole thing with the Iran deal from when Obama gave it to them to when Trump took it away is all one big play out of the Brookings report, Which Path to Persia? Options for a New American Strategy Towards Iran, that was put out in 2009. Almost verbatim. If you go in and take a look at it, it says, any military operation against Iran will likely be very unpopular around the world and require the proper international context. The best way to minimize international opprobrium and maximize support, however grudging or covert, is to strike only when there's widespread conviction that the Iranians were given but then rejected a superb offer, one so good that only a regime determined to acquire nuclear weapons and require them for the wrong reasons would turn it down. Under those circumstances, the US or Israel could portray its operations as taken in sorrow, not anger, and at least in some in the international community would conclude that the Iranians brought it all on themselves. And that is why you saw Obama's White House promoting support for this nuclear deal and really pushing it in everyone's face. They didn't really want your support, they just wanted your disgust. They actually wanted people to be angry about it. That's why you had that whole video come out with the pallets of cash. They actually wanted Americans to get really angry about the deal while promoting it. It was a psyop. You know, they wanted to put it in your face and make you angry about it so that you would call for it to be pulled, so that here at home, that's what we're getting. But really, internationally, they want it to look like Iran was given this too good to be true, awesome deal, and that they didn't abide by it, which will then garner more sympathy for the US or Israel or both when they attack Iran. That's the whole plot here that is being played, and it's verbatim coming out of this document. So, as Tony Cartalucci points out, and he's spot on, these statements encapsulate a documented conspiracy that was drafted under President Bush, implemented under President Obama, and is finally coming into full fruition under President Trump, once again illustrating the continuity of agenda that transcends party politics, presidencies, and political rhetoric, driven by immense corporate financier special interests, and not the will of the American public. And people ignored largely during the debates when Trump mentioned Iran, but he mentioned Iran quite a bit during the debates.
And you know who's going to be the beneficiary? Iran. Iran, as I said many years ago, Iran is taking over Iraq. The Iran deal and how bad a deal it is for us. It's a one-sided transaction, a terrorist state, really the number one terrorist state. Iran should write us a letter of thank you. The deal with Iran will lead to nuclear problems. All they have to do is sit back 10 years, and they don't have to do much, and they're going to end up getting nuclear. I met with Bibi Netanyahu the other day. Believe me, he is not a happy camper.
And he also has been on record as saying that he wanted to be the most pro-Israel presidential candidate in American history.
You know, I've known Donald Trump for about 15 years and have worked closely with him. When he became the presumptive nominee, he approached me, and what he said to me is, he said, David, I want to be a very pro-Israel candidate. I want to be the most pro-Israel candidate that this nation has seen.
First of all, there's nobody on this stage that's more pro-Israel than I am.
After this happened and when this stuff started coming out this week, reports also came out that Israel was talking about possibly nominating Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize for how he's trying to bring peace and stability to the Middle East. But anyways, the very next day after Trump is sending out these tweets about putting Iran on notice, then you have Trump slapping fresh sanctions on Iran. Sanctions, by the way, which include at least one company that's actually based in China. So they're not really, it's not just Iran they're messing with. And if you look at the people that Trump has surrounded himself with, all the military, it's basically just one huge sign that they're building up towards this war. People like appointing John Kelly to lead Homeland Security. This guy, my gosh, seriously, makes Janet Napolitano look good. By comparison, much scarier. Dude, this guy, he ran the United States Southern Command. He was in charge of Guantanamo Bay. He is an avid pro-torture guy who has been quoted as saying, if you think this war against our way of life is over because of some self-appointed opinion makers and chattering class that are growing war-weary because they want to be out of Iraq and Afghanistan, you're mistaken. This enemy is dedicated to our destruction. He will fight us for generations, and the conflict will move through various phases, as it has since 9/11. He also commanded troops during the invasion and occupation of Iraq, which led up to the deaths of, 1 million civilians. And when he was interviewed about that, he actually told a reporter, Baghdad ain't shit. So that's the guy right there, the guy who they say Kelly is, to use the phrase of Smedley Butler, a high-class muscle man for big business, Wall Street, and the bankers, which I guess makes sense since Trump has filled his cabinet with bankers, Goldman Sachs, even got House of Rothschild in there. So totally makes sense to put a guy like this in charge, but geez, that's our Homeland Security Secretary. So yeah, not only that, but Kurt Nimmo reported on the fact that on her first day on the job, his new UN ambassador, Nikki Haley, used her inaugural speech at the UN to condemn who? Oh yeah, that's right, Russia.
The United States is determined to push for action. There is no time to waste. I consider it unfortunate that the occasion of my first appearance here is one in which I must condemn the aggressive actions of Russia. It is unfortunate because
she's reading a script, and that is the part that she is supposed to play, and that is what she has been told to do. And she just wanted to hit that point home a little further by sending out this portion of her speech to make sure, just in case Russia didn't see that speech or didn't know about that speech, she wanted to make sure that they knew that she's condemning Russia. And she also sent out this picture of her face. I guess that's her I'm condemning Russia face. I don't know.
Russia is going to continue to be at the forefront of a lot of issues that we have to deal with.
So all of this has happened in just the span of a couple of weeks. A couple weeks is all it has been. I really want to get to the heart of the matter and what's really going on with how things have been manipulated to this point. You need to go read up on Steve Bannon's opinions of things and what he thinks. And I'm not talking about identity politics, race baiting, where they try to make him out to be racist or whatever. I don't know about any of that, and that is not the point here. The point here is his obsession with this book, and they mention it in here. It's a book he actually ended up making a documentary on called The Fourth Turning. And it has to do with this theory that American history can be described in these 4-phase cycles that are repeated again and again. And this article over at Business Insider sums it up pretty well. Steve Bannon's obsession with a dark theory of history should be worrisome. He talks about how there are these 80 to 100 year cycles. When they come to an end, a cataclysmic event destroys the old order and brings in a new one. So order out of chaos, new world order. This era of change is known as the Fourth Turning, and Bannon believes we're in the midst of that now. And that's what his entire documentary here was about, where he believes the catalyst was actually the 2008 collapse, and now we're going to have this war that they're obviously bringing about as fast as they possibly can. It says, according to the book, the last two fourth turnings that America experienced were the Civil War and the Reconstruction, and then the Great Depression and World War II, and before that it was the Revolutionary War. All of these were marked periods of dread and decay in which the American people were forced to unite to rebuild a new future, but only after a massive conflict in which many lives were lost. It all starts with a catalyst event, a period of regeneracy. There's a defining climax in which a war for the old order is fought, and finally there's a resolution in which the new world order is established. That is the whole thing. It's bringing chaos to create order. But there's two things about that are never taken into consideration when they talk about this stuff. The first one is the fact that all of those events, the Civil War, the Great Depression, and especially World War II, were manipulated events. They weren't organic events that just had to happen because there's this 80-year cycle and that's just how it is. All of those events were manipulated, okay? And the second point I want to make is that they were manipulated And was the order that came out of any of those better? Did it make things better? Did things get better? No, okay? They always centralize power, and they always push us towards whatever the new future is. And the new future, you guys, is Agenda 2030. And we have talked about the United Nations agendas at length, but part of Trump's travel ban, part of his executive order, he even mentions one of the things he's fast-tracking is biometric entry and exit at airports. Biometrics in the airports, guys, that's not going to just be for immigrants and foreign visitors to the country. That's going to be for everyone. They're going to be facially recognizing, iris scanning, and fingerprinting everyone. If you want to leave this country, you're going to have to do that. And they've put that in place, and they've told Mr. Warmonger over there at the DHS that they want to fast track that biometric entry-exit system for all people. It's not written to just say that's just for immigrants. That's for everybody, and that's coming. This whole cashless grid and everything else, all of that stuff is coming, but to get us there, they need some kind of huge catalyst for the paradigm shift to get us into the system they want us to be on. Bannon also came out, by the way, and said that in the next 10 years, we're going to be at war with China, no doubt. That's a quote. He also said that there's going to be another really large war in the Middle East. What do you think he's talking about? He's talking about Iran. There will be a war in the South China Sea. There's no doubt about that. And at the same time, U.S. will be in another major war in the Middle East because he knows what's up. Trump is he's just the tool that they're using to get this agenda rammed through. This has nothing to do with Trump. People have so bought into the cult of personality, they're going blind to what's actually happening. I mean, do I think it's good that he's getting rid of Obamacare and the TPP? I absolutely think that's great. Does that mean I'm going to stand around and cheerlead as he leads us into the next gigantic war? No, absolutely not. And I think it's really sad that there's a large portion of the liberty movement that has sold itself out and gone back on its own values doing that. And when I say Trump is a tool, I literally mean a tool. Look at this interview that Steve Bannon gave with Vanity Fair. Scroll all the way down. They actually have a pull quote here that's, I think, sums it up for you. He said, "Trump is a blunt instrument for us. I don't know whether he really gets it or not." That's all you need to know. Trump is their instrument to bring about what Bannon believes is the fourth turning. And while I appreciate that he thinks he's going to institute a new world order that's going to be the good new world order, there's a deep state that's behind all of this that is not going to allow things to be the way that these people think that all of these people are different levels of tools for this agenda that's being pushed. It's really all it is. I always wondered during the election about Hillary because she had to know how hated, loathed, and unpopular she was. She was probably the most unpopular presidential candidate in American history, hands down, right? And she didn't even really campaign, and she did things during the campaign that didn't really make any sense, too. Even for someone who maybe just has been told they're gonna win or they've got it in the bag, still she wouldn't say and do some of the things that she did. This is all a big show. Why? Because she was the villain, you guys. This is how it works. You can't have a hero with hero worship and building up the hero unless you've got a really great villain. And that's who Hillary Clinton was. She was the villain in the stage play that was our last election. All they're doing here is continuing the same agenda that they have been on. It was started under Bush, it was continued under Obama, and now it's being exponentially ramped up under Trump. I just hope that people start to look at this and see all of it for what it really is. This is what's happening. They are taking us to war. And people are going to be too blinded by their own infighting or alternately cult of personality hero worship to see it.
Iran now starting massive war drills in the wake of the Trump election.
Go back to Iran. You said they will do what I tell them. How do you make them do what you say?
They will know I'm not playing games.
Military action against Iran? Are you going to do something to that country?
Well, I would want to help Saudi Arabia. I would want to protect Saudi Arabia, but Saudi Arabia is going to have to help us. But they were making $1 billion a
but
day.
You dodged my question. Would you take action against Iran militarily if you're president?
Depending on what the deal is, I would have to do that. I would defend certain groups of people over there.
You tell the Middle East we're not using a nuclear weapon.
I would never say that. I would never take any of my cards off the table.
How about Europe? We won't use it in Europe.
I'm not going to take it off the table.
You might 3 times he asked about the use of nuclear weapons. 3 times he asked, at one point, if we have them, why can't we use them?
Trump asked 3 times.
3 times in an hour briefing, why can't we use nuclear weapons?
Donald Trump is sounding warnings about the risk of a 9/11 style attack.
Bad things will happen. A lot of bad things will happen. There will be attacks that you wouldn't believe. There will be attacks by the people that are right now coming into our country, because I have no doubt.
A federal judge has put a temporary halt on the president's travel ban nationwide.
In fact, we call ourselves internally the Fight Club.
My first appearance here is one in which I must condemn the aggressive actions of Russia.
We're going to have to send China a clear signal that first, the island building stops, and second, your access to those islands is also not going to be allowed.
The Chinese newspaper says, quote, unless Washington plans to wage a large-scale war in the South China Sea, trying to block China's access to the islands would be, quote, foolish.
In fact, we call ourselves internally the Fight Club. The Fight Club
is your greatest gift to us. Teach us to respect life from its natural beginning to its natural end. Help us to reach out to the marginalized in our society from its natural beginning to its natural end. Help us to reach out to the marginalized.
President Trump has invited Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to Washington next month. The two did have a phone conversation yesterday, which was described as very warm.
Donald Trump is going to war for Israel. Never before has a president been so incredibly pro-Israel.
And we will go and confront Russia. What? Over Syria? We're going to start World War III, right? Give me a break.